Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I was 17 the October we rented that old cabin up in Ridgetop Valley, Oklahoma. I swear the place looked like someone had pulled it straight out of a postcard. Weathered wood, peeling white paint, and a crooked porch swing that hadn't seen oil since the Bush era. My mom had booked it on AirBnb because she said we needed a fall detox. No phones, no crowds, no traffic, just us and the trees. It was me, my mom Marlene, my stepdad Rob, and my little brother Jasper. We'd arrived pretty late the night before. The county roads were pitch black, and my mom said every turn looked like it was leading straight into a murder documentary. I laughed, but honestly, I kind of agreed. When we finally pulled in, the headlights lit up the cabin just enough to see its shape. It was quiet in that heavy way that makes your stomach drop. The host, a guy named Patrick, left a printed note on the door with the code and some rules. Same old stuff. Keep food inside, lock the door, don't feed the wildlife. But at the bottom was something scratched in with different ink. Fog gets real thick in the mornings. Don't go wandering off the paths when you can't see 20 feet ahead. We brushed it off. My mom said the guy was probably just covering his ass. Jasper, who was 11 and thought he was invincible, said, "Fog's just water. I'm not scared of water." We argued over who got which room. Jasper got the one with the bunk beds. I got the one with the ugly floral curtains but better heat. After unpacking and microwaving frozen mac and cheese, we went to bed. I lay awake longer than I should have, listening to the creaks of the floorboards and that buzz from the tiny fridge. It was cold, quiet, a little too quiet. I didn't sleep much. When my eyes slid open, the cabin was gray, lit only by a faint morning light pushing through the curtains. My phone said 6:58, 0 bars. I quietly got dressed, sweatshirt, thermal, jeans. Dad had given me a survival whistle last year, but I'd forgotten it. I grabbed my water bottle, my old pocket knife, and an apple. I scribbled on a sticky note, went for a hike, lake trail, back before 9. K. Kylie, that's me. I stepped outside and winced when the porch plank squeaked under my boot. The fog was thick, so thick the trees 30 feet away were just shadows. You could barely see the trailhead marker at the start of the woods. It was the kind of fog that feels like it has breath. It pushes up against you, cool and damp, like it's alive. I took a deep breath, pulled my hood up, and got moving. The trail was marked with orange blazes on the trees. Most of them were faded, scratched by time or bears or maybe bored hikers with knives. The leaves underfoot were wet and slick, sticking to the tread of my boots. You could hear water dripping down, hitting mud, then pooling somewhere off to the right. It was weird how loud it all sounded. Every step I took felt too big, too close to my ears. The fog swallowed everything else. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of my own footsteps. About 15 minutes in, I reached a fork where a wooden sign pointed left. Lake access, 0.6 miles. Easy morning hike. I headed left. The air was colder here, and something about the silence felt wrong. But I kept going. I'd come this far. And I didn't want to be the teenager who came back early because she got spooked by weather. The fog thickened. I could feel it on my eyelashes. I tried to stay close to the blazes, but they were getting harder to spot. I was just thinking that maybe I should turn back when I heard something behind me. A branch snapping. Not loud. Just one sharp break, like someone had stepped on it. My heart kicked. I stopped walking. I told myself it was a deer. It had to be a deer. But the fog made it sound close, like 10 feet away. I swallowed and kept moving. I didn't look back. Looking back would make it real, but I heard it again a minute later. Heavier, slower, like a person trying not to make a sound but failing. That deliberate weight on leaves. I knew it wasn't an animal. I stopped again, turned around. Nothing. Just gray air and the long shadows of trees. But I felt it. Not physically. More like the way your skin prickles when someone's watching you. The fog was too thick for me to see anything, but it felt thick with intention, like something was in it. I pushed my hand into the front pocket of my hoodie, fingers brushing the cheap pocket knife I'd brought. It felt small, insignificant, but having it made me feel a little less alone. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded tiny in the fog. Nothing. I started walking again, quicker this time. I kept telling myself I'd reach the lake soon and the fog would thin out near the water. It always does, right? Then I heard it for real footsteps. Not mine, not echoes. Someone walking, matching my pace just far enough behind that I couldn't see them. I turned again, the fog shifted, and for a second I thought I saw a shape through the trees, a dark, tall figure standing still, like they were waiting for me to notice them. "Hey," I said louder this time. "You need something?" Nothing again. The figure didn't move. I didn't blink. I wanted to keep making eye contact, but then a drop of water slid down my nose and I wiped it, and by the time I looked back, the shape was gone. That's when a voice cracked in my throat. "Fuck this." I booked it. I didn't run full speed. I was too scared of tripping, but I walked fast. Fast enough that my breath grew sharp. I reached the next blaze, then another, but the trail twisted, and in the white, endless fog, everything felt unfamiliar. I should have started seeing the lake by now. Water has a sound, but I heard no water, just footsteps behind me, getting closer. I said it out loud this time. "Okay, whoever's there, knock it off." The steps stopped. I slowed, turned around, and that's when I heard it. Breathing, slow and raspy, from just beyond the first row of trees. Someone was standing there watching me. I don't know why I did what I did next. You know how in horror movies you're yelling at the character, "Don't go over there." You're yelling because you know something's wrong, but you don't. And that's what it was. I took a step closer, squinting, trying to make out a face. Then it said my name. Kylie. Not a whisper, not a shout. Just a voice saying it. Wrong, like someone who'd heard it once and practiced. Flat, toneless. My heart stopped. I stepped back and nearly slipped on wet leaves. "Nope," I said, louder. "No, stay back." The breathing got closer, and then I heard a sound that didn't belong. A tap, like a stick hitting wood, then another tap, closer. I turned and ran. Branches caught the hoodie. Something scraped my arm, but I kept going. My lungs burned. My throat felt raw. I shouted for my mom, even though I knew she was nowhere near. I shouted again, "Rob, Rob!" I didn't hear anything but my own footsteps and the ragged wheeze behind me. Keeping pace, I stumbled over a log, fell hard on my hip, tasted dirt in my teeth. I scrambled up, hands shaking, and kept running. I didn't know where I was going anymore. There were no blazes, no signs, just fog and trees and panic. I reached a shallow dip in the ground and saw it. A fallen tree trunk, partially hollow, covered in moss and dead leaves. I dropped inside and crawled under the rotted wood, pulling debris over my back. The earth was cold and damp. I felt bugs crawling on my neck. I stayed still. It came. I heard the steps. Slow now, deliberate. Whoever it was, their breathing sounded almost too calm, like they'd been waiting a long time for this. They walked right past my hiding spot, close enough that I could hear fabric brushing bark. Then they stopped, not walking, just waiting. Then I heard that tap again, the stick hitting a rock this time. If they'd leaned over, they'd have seen me. I held my breath until my face felt numb. My knees throbbed from the fall. I didn't dare shift, didn't dare breathe. Then suddenly, "Kylie!" This time it was different. It was Rob yelling, real panic in his voice. "Kylie, answer me!" The fog didn't hold his voice. It cut through it. I choked on relief. I pushed a hand out from under the log, dirt dripping from my sleeves. "Here!" I shouted, scrambling out. "I'm here!" I heard footsteps moving fast, the wrong direction, away from me. Whoever it was ran. I could hear them breaking branches. The tap sound faded. Rob crashed through the fog, his eyes wild, hair wet with sweat and dew. "Jesus, Kylie, are you hurt?" "What happened?" I broke. Then I told him everything. Words tumbling out, breath shaking. He didn't question me, didn't downplay it. He just looked toward the woods, hand around my shoulder, jaw set tight. "Let's go," he said. "We're calling the sheriff." We made it back just as the fog thinned. Jasper stared at my mud-covered knees. My mom dropped her mug and said, "Oh my God." Her voice cracked. "They called the sheriff's office. 2 deputies came. They listened, didn't smirk, didn't tell me it was a bear or a hiker. They said they'd do a sweep. One of them, a guy named Hicks, turned to Rob and said, "Happens sometimes out here. People come off the road to be alone. Not all of them mean well. You did right pulling her out." They found fresh tracks, bigger than mine, with scuffed dirt where someone had pivoted fast and left. We stayed inside that night, watching a movie we didn't really watch. I didn't sleep. I just listened to the fog roll in again. I imagined the same breath, same slow steps, somewhere far off in the woods, holding a stick, tapping it against tree bark, waiting for the fog to be thick enough to move again. We left before sunrise the next day, didn't wait for checkout. Rob kept the keys in the ignition and kept checking the rearview mirror. I still think about that voice saying my name, flat, wrong, and I wonder if it was human at all, or something older just using the shape of a person to stay close. Either way, I'll never forget the sound of that breathing, that low, broken rasp followed by the slightest whistle, like it was noting me. I never used to believe that a simple vacation could change your life. That was before everything went down last October, before the kind of night you think only exists in urban legends and internet creepypasta. If it hadn't happened to me, I'd probably still roll my eyes at those campfire tales. But it did, and I can't forget it. Let me take you back, not to some old demon-ridden house or abandoned asylum, just a regular Airbnb, a cute little cabin deep in the Pennsylvania woods. From the outside, it looked like a perfect fall getaway, but man, I should have known better. Backstory and setup. The plan was solid. 3 of us, me, Tiara, and Nolan. We'd all been working like crazy since summer, barely seeing daylight outside our offices. So when the idea of a Halloween cabin trip popped up in our group chat, we jumped on it. Something low-key. Maybe a bonfire, maybe some beers, definitely horror movies. Just chill. I booked the place. A cabin named Wildflower Haven in the middle of Rust Ridge Forest, about 40 miles outside Scranton. The pictures had that Pinterest-perfect vibe. Porch swing, fire pit, mountain views. The listing said, no neighbors within 2 miles. Perfect, too perfect maybe. The week of, we were all hyped. I'd gone to Costco to stock up on snacks and drinks. Nolan brought his projector. Tiara packed like we were going for a month. Blankets, candles, even fairy lights for the porch. Then Friday happened. The dropouts first was Nolan. He called that morning while I was on my second coffee. "Dave, listen, I got news from the plant. Someone walked out mid-shift and now they need me on the weekend. If I say no, it'll be my ass." I groaned. "Bro, you can't bail like that. We already booked everything." "I know, man. I'll Venmo you my share. I'm really sorry." Before I could be mad, Tiara texted in the group chat. Tiara, "Hey, emergency. My sister got into a fender bender and I gotta help her file reports and shit. Don't hate me. Me. Y'all for real right now? Nolan, promise I'll make it up to you. Tiara, I'll pay for the snacks too? Pinky promise." I stared at my phone. 2 dropouts in 1 hour. Classic. Alone wasn't the plan, but backing out wasn't an option. I've always been stubborn about these things. I wanted the weekend. I needed it. I convinced myself I could make the best of it. Bring a notebook, fish in the creek. maybe even enjoy the quiet for once. Of course, I packed a little extra whiskey too. The drive and arrival. The drive out was therapeutic at first. It was late October, and the leaves had done that magic trick where they turned the forest into a painting. Gold and burnt orange, like the world was on fire but peacefully. So, once I left the highway, my phone lost service. No streaming, no GPS, just the mental map I downloaded and the printed directions I'd stuck to my sun visor old school. Around mile marker 12, the pavement turned to gravel and then dirt, crunched under my tires. Trees closed in, tall and patient, watching. I swear they were watching. Wildflower Haven was just a smidge over a mile into the woods. I knew I was there when the trees suddenly peeled back to reveal a clearing, and there it stood, the cabin, rustic with rough timber siding and a tin roof. A wooden swing swayed gently on the porch, even though there wasn't a breeze. Perfect, I muttered, killing the engine and stretching my arms. The silence was total. I mean total. No cars, no birds, just me and the space between. Inside, the place was surprisingly modern. At least at first glance, one main room, the living and dining mixed, plus a small kitchen in the back, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub. The fireplace was legit stone, with a mantel lined with faux antique lanterns. Someone left a mason jar of wildflowers on the table. Cute. Too cute. I set my duffel down and went right for the porch, cracked open a beer, and let the chill Pennsylvania air snake through my hoodie. For a moment, I felt like I'd made the right call staying. That was the last moment that felt right. First night, the signs. Folks always talk about how horror stories start on night 1. They're right. I was sipping whiskey, sketching in my notebook, when I heard a voice. Soft, far off, a woman maybe. It came from the tree line, but disappeared almost instantly. I sat up. Hello? Silence. Then the forest seemed to breathe again. I told myself it was an animal, or the booze, or just wind playing tricks, that's all. But when I went inside to warm up by the fire, I noticed something weird. The mason jar. The one with the wildflowers? It was on the opposite side of the table now. I sat, staring at it for a full minute. Had I moved it earlier? No, I'd barely touched it. My head felt suddenly heavy, like gravity got thicker. That's creepy, I whispered. Then louder I said, I'm alone, right? Yeah, alone. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. I slept with my hoodie on that night, fire crackling, blanket pulled up to my chin. Somewhere a branch snapped outside, but I dozed off. Eventually Halloween arrival, the scream. The next day was uneventful. I went fishing, made coffee, read, tried to video chat Nolan, but yeah, no service. I even talked out loud just to fill the space. By dusk, I'd resigned myself to a weird but harmless solo retreat. Then Halloween night came. I was watching old Twilight Zone episodes on my laptop. The wind was picking up, howling across the forest, making the windows groan. Around 11 p.m., I shut everything down and was brushing my teeth when I heard it, a scream. Sharp, blood-curdling, real. What? I dropped my toothbrush and ran to the living room, heart clawing its way up my throat. The scream came again, closer this time. Please, somebody help. My breath stopped. Outside, beyond the front yard of fallen leaves, someone was running. I yanked open the door before my brain had time to think. A woman, mid-20s maybe, stumbled out of the woods and into the porch light. Her hair was tangled, her face streaked with mud or tears, clothes torn barefoot. She collapsed at my feet. Oh my God! Hey, are you okay? She scrambled inside on her hands, panic in her eyes. Please, shut the door. I slammed it shut. Through the bolt. What happened? I asked. My voice was shaking. Hers was worse. Someone's been chasing me for hours. He's trying to hurt me, kill me. Please don't let him in. I grabbed her a blanket and a glass of water. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Where's your car? I asked. Down the road, she whispered. Engine died. I ran. I kept running. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, but the silence shattered with the first knock. No, knock is too polite. It was a thud, hard, like a fist the size of a sledgehammer hitting wood. "Give her back," came a voice, deep, angry, too calm. "She's mine." I froze. The woman shrieked again. "Don't open it. Please don't." I stepped back from the door. Every instinct screamed at me to do something. But what? I grabbed the fireplace poker. "Leave, now, I'm calling the cops." "You think that's gonna save you?" the voice growled. Then another slam. Wood splintered. He was breaking in. I turned to face the woman, and that's when her eyes went dead cold. "We don't like to be interrupted," she said. Something metal flashed in her hand. I felt a sudden hit to the back of my head, a sharp, dizzying explosion, and everything went black. Morning after. The horror. I came to with a splitting headache, my vision blurred. The living room was in chaos. Drawers pulled out, couches flipped, my bags gone. The front door was hanging open on one hinge. The outside was quiet and empty. It was cold near dawn, and I could see my breath. No, 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 no. I staggered to the porch. My truck, gone. My phone, gone. Wallet, laptop, everything, gone. They cleaned me out. They'd played it perfect, using fear to get in, using trust to blind me. I wanted to collapse, scream, cry. Instead, I grabbed the poker, some survival instinct kicking in, and I walked down that dirt road, step after step, bleeding, alone. After what felt like hours, I found a small cabin with smoke trickling from a chimney. An old man sat on his porch, rocking in a wooden chair. He took one look at me, and his face twisted. Pity, familiarity, resignation. "Another one," he said quietly. "Come on, let's get you inside." He called the police. They came, took my report. They'd heard it before. It was a known scam, they said. Criminals posing as victims, using Airbnb or secluded rental listings to target guest professionals. They never get caught. I got a ride home, lost my truck, lost thousands in gear and electronics. But the worst thing they stole wasn't any of that. They stole my trust. Now, when someone knocks, I don't answer the door. When someone screams for help, I hesitate. I hate that. I used to believe you help someone in need, that if you're a good person, good things circle back. Now I just remember that feeling of letting the monster in, and wondering how many others are still out there, knocking, waiting for their chance. I never used to believe in gut instinct, not really. I always thought it was something people said when they wanted to justify an irrational decision, but what happened that weekend? I still think about it whenever I hear someone split wood, or when fog rolls in just right, thick and low, swallowing up the horizon. That's when it creeps back into my bones, the feeling I felt that night. A feeling that has stayed with me ever since. A feeling that I've come to trust. It started simple enough. My partner Jax and I had just hit our 7-year mark. We were both exhausted, emotionally and physically, from living in Los Angeles. He's a music producer, always working, always grinding to stay relevant. I'm an ER nurse, and between the double shifts, the chaos, and the constant tension of the city, I felt like I was barely breathing anymore. We needed a break, but we didn't want to fly somewhere or be around a bunch of people. We wanted quiet isolation, maybe even stillness. "So what do you think?" Jax asked one night, his laptop open, a picture of a cozy wood cabin filling the screen. The listing showed a cabin tucked in some forested mountains. The listing said, "Serenity Grove Cabin, a place to unplug and unwind." It was on a 15-acre property, no neighbors, a real wood fireplace, vinyl record player, handcrafted cedar furniture, and it claimed to have the best stargazing in Washington state. The host's name was Eli. He had over 100 positive reviews. Words like thoughtful and attentive popped out everywhere. "You know," I said, kicking off my shoes, sinking into the couch, "that kind of sounds like heaven." And it did. We booked it for 4 nights. That Thursday, we loaded up Jax's old Pathfinder, snacks, board games, my e-reader, and a few desert wines we'd been saving for a special occasion. We left the city behind before dawn, hit the interstate north, and by lunchtime, we were winding through pine forests and mountains, climbing toward endless quiet. Everything seemed perfect. Downshift into first gear, pine-scented air, open windows, laughing together like we hadn't in months. But then, as we climbed, the sky changed. Thick clouds dropped low over the mountains. At first, it was a soft mist, but then it began to thicken, darken. Visibility shrank. The last 10 miles were only a gravel road full of switchbacks. And then, the fog came. Midway through a sentence, Jax stopped talking. Whoa. I squinted. The road disappearing just ahead of the headlights. Damn. We rolled on through. No music now. Just the sound of rocks under the tires. Feels like a horror movie, I said, pressing back in my seat. You better not jinx us, he shot back, checking the GPS. We're almost there. One more turn. That fog, dense, cold, on every side. We could only see a slice of gravel in front of us. And when we finally saw the cabin up ahead, a faint wooden outline, an amber porch light, both of us let out this silent breath, like we hadn't realized we'd been holding it. Home sweet home, Jax muttered. We parked. The fog ate the rest of the driveway behind us. The tall trees were just silhouettes vanishing into thin white. It didn't feel like being in nature. It felt like being trapped in a snow globe somebody forgot to shake. But the cabin itself? God, it was beautiful single-story timber frame. There were autumn flowers in a clay pot near the door, cozy curtains inside the windows, a small wooden sign, carved and stained, Serenity Grove. As we stepped onto the porch, I noticed a wicker basket by the door. Wait, what's this? I asked. Jax picked it up. Inside were 2 jars of local blackberry jam, a wheel of cheese, crackers, and a handwritten note on cream cardstock. The edges slightly uneven, like someone cut it from a larger sheet. Welcome, Tessa and Jax, I read. My stomach clenched. I hadn't mentioned Jax's name in the reservation. It was under my account. Weird, but maybe harmless. The letter continued. I left fresh logs by the fireplace. The cedar burns clean. There's apple cider in the fridge. It's from a farm down the road. I hope you'll love the land here as much as I do. Please follow the trail behind the cabin for a breathtaking view at sunset. I think you'll especially like it, Tessa. If your profile picture is anything to go by, enjoy your stay. You have the place entirely to yourselves. Signed, Eli. Hold on, I said, reading that line again. How would he know it's me in my profile picture? It's tiny on the Airbnb site. You can barely see my face. Maybe he zoomed in, Jax said with a shrug, but his brows were drawn together. It bothered him too. He shrugged it off like he always did. Maybe he's just a superhost creeping a bit for that 5-star review, but I couldn't shake it. The idea of someone zooming in on my photo, looking at it carefully enough to notice that I was standing by a canyon in my favorite jeans, it sent a ripple through me I couldn't name then. We tried to forget about it. Get cozy, light a fire, unpack. The place smelled faintly of cedar and old books. It was like stepping inside a memory, warm, rustic, just enough modern charm to make it comfortable. There was a vintage turntable with a stack of records, Etta James, the Rolling Stones, Billie Holiday, the kind of music you'd want on a night like this. We put on At Last and started laughing, spinning around the living room like idiots. For a moment, it felt perfect. Until the chopping started. It was around 9:40 p.m. Jax was chopping vegetables in the kitchen while I looked through a photo book someone had left on a coffee table. Images of the cabin through all 4 seasons. Then, a sharp, distant crack. I flinched. What was that? I asked. Probably a branch fallen or something, Jax said. But after a moment, another thwack. Then another. Steady, measured, like someone methodically splitting wood, somewhere off in the surrounding woods. Then closer. and closer still. "You hearing that?" Jax finally said, looking up. "Yeah, someone chopping wood in the middle of the night? It's like almost 10. We went to the front window. The fog outside had thickened again, almost glowing white in the reflection of the porch light. I could barely make out even the ground, just that sound, sharp, echoing, closer. "Shit," Jax whispered. Now it was maybe 20 yards away. But because of that damn fog, we couldn't see a thing. It was just sound, and it was getting louder. Let's go outside, just real quick." "Shine the flashlight," I said, already regretting it. We stepped out onto the porch, the cold hitting us instantly. The flashlight's beam was swallowed by the fog like it was nothing. "Hello?" Jax called into the silent white. The chopping stopped. Dead just, gone. But now, the quiet felt worse. We backed inside quickly, locking the door behind us. By the time midnight came, it had started again. The chopping. Then came footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing on the gravel outside. "Tessa," Jax whispered, "stay here." He stood just by the window, gripping the poker from the fireplace like a weapon. The footsteps stopped again. We held our breath. Then, nothing. No one slept that night. The next morning, we called the host. "Hey, Eli?" Jax said, trying to sound casual. "We just had kind of a weird thing last night. Someone was chopping wood close by. We're wondering, do you have neighbors?" "Ah, no," Eli said immediately. His voice was warm, almost amused. "You're the only guess. The closest property is 5 miles away. That's the whole point of the place, right? Peace and quiet." "Yeah," Jax said slowly. "Right. You two are good, yeah? Anything you need?" "Nope, we're fine." We hung up. Jax just stared at me. I stared back. "So who the hell was out there?" he said finally. The rest of the day was a blur. We tried taking a hike, following the trail behind the cabin, but it was hard to feel calm when every snapped twig felt like a warning. We cut the walk short and spent most of the day inside, windows shut, curtains drawn. That night, a heavy rainstorm rolled in. I used to love rain, the sound of it, the way it wraps the world in gray, but not this time. It felt like we were trapped inside a drum, every drop a reminder that the outside was off limits. It was 1:57 a.m. when I heard it, the back door handle turning. Not rattling, not knocking, turning. I froze in bed, sleep gone in an instant. My throat tightened. I touched Jax's arm, cold with sweat, and whispered, "Someone's inside." He was up in seconds. He kept a small handgun in his travel bag, one he'd taken back when he was touring with bands and got mugged in Albuquerque. I hated that gun, but at that moment, I was grateful for it. He grabbed it, quietly got up, walked to the bedroom doorway. He paused there, listening. Another sound, a footstep, slow, wood creaking under someone's weight. We didn't have time to think. He opened the door, flicked the hallway light, and there he was, standing in the living room, back turned to us, dripping rainwater on the wooden floor, holding a large kitchen knife. It was Eli. He turned slowly. The knife glinted under the light. He smiled, just a little, like he'd been caught taking something off the top shelf. "Hey, easy," he said, raising one hand. "I saw lights out in the trees. Thought someone else was on the property." "You don't bring a knife when you're checking on someone," Jax said sharply. His voice was steady. His hand was shaking. He was pointing the gun directly at Eli. "Front door was unlocked. Figured you two must be asleep. I didn't want to scare anyone. You need to get down on the floor, now." Jax's voice dropped. He was not fucking around. Eli did what he was told. For a minute, we all just stood there, the rain pounding outside, the fire burnt down to embers. "Tessa," Jax said, "keys, let's go." We left everything, clothes, food, the bottles of wine, that fucking basket, everything. We just got in the car and drove like hell down the winding mountain road, the headlights catching nothing but white fog and shadows for miles. We finally got cell service an hour later, called 911, drove to the sheriff's station, told them everything. They listened, took notes, didn't look surprised. "We know this guy," one deputy said when Jax finished talking. "You're not the first people who've reported something weird." "So why isn't he arrested?" I asked, voice cracking. "No proof," the officer said. "He knows how to toe the line. He owns that land. No forced entry. No physical harm. You see how this plays out?" We went back home. We tried to forget, but we couldn't. Months later, I checked Airbnb. The cabin was still listed, still 5 stars, still full of reviews like this. We loved Eli's attention to detail, fresh flowers on the table, personalized note. It was magical. The trails are breathtaking. Host was so thoughtful. Absolute peace. No one mentions the fog or the chopping, or the footsteps, or the knife. Maybe they were lucky. Maybe he's patient. Or maybe they didn't make it out. That was 3 years ago. Jax and I moved. Changed cities. We're okay. Mostly. But sometimes, when it's cold and quiet, and I hear a sound in the night that doesn't make sense, something inside me hits the alarm. Trust your gut. Something I never believed in. Until I did. I never thought a simple cross-country drive would leave me questioning reality, or my own sanity. I'd been planning the trip for months, a solo trek from the suburbs of St. Paul, Minnesota, down to Santa Fe, New Mexico, stopping to see some relatives I hadn't met in years. I wasn't expecting anything fancy from the stay, just a place to sleep, shower, and maybe grab a breather before the second half of a long drive. My relatives, the McKinneys, lived in a quiet neighborhood in a town called Laurel Falls. It's not one of those postcard perfect towns you see in ads. It's ordinary grocery stores, old diners, a mom-and-pop hardware shop with the same rusty sign since 1985. But it was familiar. I'd been there once as a kid, and the smell of pine trees carried a sort of nostalgic comfort. I booked an Airbnb for 2 nights. The McKinneys didn't have room for guests, and I didn't want to impose. The host's name was Colton, and the listing was pretty straightforward. Cozy suburban home, private room, full house access. I glanced through the images. Crisp white walls, a half-finished basement, and a backyard with a grill and a swing set that had seen a few too many winters. Not glamorous, but it felt safe. The night I arrived, it was already 10:41 p.m. The roads were empty, and the only thing breaking silence was the hum of crickets and the occasional dog barking in the distance. I rolled my car into the short driveway and grabbed my duffel, tired as hell from 11 hours behind the wheel. As I stepped out, fumbling for the door code in my inbox, I felt someone come up right behind me. I almost dropped my keys. "Hey there," a man's voice said casually, way too close. I turned, heart kicking hard against my ribs. A tall guy, probably in his mid-40s, wearing a flannel shirt and holding a paper cup of coffee, stood in the glow of the porch light. His eyes looked tired, but wide awake at the same time. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. I'm Colton." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Oh, hey, yeah, I didn't expect you to be here." I tried to sound relaxed, but failed miserably. He handed me a faint smile that didn't really reach his eyes. "I live just down the street. Thought I'd stop by and make sure you got in okay. Not every guest reads emails, you know." He chuckled a little, but I wasn't laughing. Colton offered to help me with my bags, and while it wasn't something I usually accepted from strangers, I didn't have the energy to argue. We walked into the house, and he started giving me a quick tour like a realtor on autopilot. "And here's your room," he said, swinging the door open to show a tidy guest room. Queen-sized bed, clean linens, a little lamp on the nightstand, with a half-burnt candle next to it. Bathrooms across the hall, kitchens for full use. Adjust the thermostat if you need. I nodded, already leaning into the doorway, wanting this interaction to end. Colton backed down the hallway and turned toward the stairs. "Well, if you need anything, don't be shy. I'm usually up late." "Thanks," I said, though I didn't mean it. Something about him was off, not enough to panic, but enough to make me lock the bedroom door twice before I went to bed. Sleep came in pieces. I'd drift off, wake up an hour later with my heart racing, then repeat. By morning, I felt like I'd closed my eyes for 3 minutes total. I spent the afternoon visiting my relatives. Aunt Linda made her famous chicken casserole. Uncle Pete talked a mile a minute about the Ford truck he rebuilt last year. There was comfort in all of it, familiar chaos, but I kept catching myself zoning out. Something from the night before was still gnawing at me, but I couldn't explain why. By 6 p.m., my eyelids felt heavy again. I told the McKinneys I'd be by tomorrow morning before heading out. "You sure you don't want to stay here?" Aunt Linda asked, touching my arm. "It's all good. I'll be rested up tonight," I said. Famous last words. The sun was just starting to dip behind the rooftops as I pulled back into the Airbnb driveway. With some takeout in hand, I walked up to the front door and immediately noticed it. Unlocked. My stomach sank. I was sure I'd locked it when I left. With everything in me, I hoped this was just me being forgetful from exhaustion. I called out as I stepped in. "Hello? Colton? Anyone here?" Silence. The house was dark. I flipped on a few lights on my way to the kitchen table, set the food down, and sat with the TV on as background noise while I ate. That's when I heard it. A low, hollow thump. Not loud, but somehow deliberate. It came from the back of the house. I froze, holding my fork in midair. The sound came again, this time closer, like something tapping the wall or someone quietly bumping into it. God, I wanted to ignore it. Just pack up my shit and leave. But something compelled me to get up and walk toward the hallway. The sound came from the last room on the left. I opened the door. It was a small, empty den with a single futon pushed against the wall. No windows. The air felt untouched, like a room no one ever used. Yet here I was, staring at it like it was hiding something. I stepped inside, flicked on the light, and my breath caught behind the futon. Barely noticeable was a thin, vertical line in the wall, a seam. I moved the futon aside. There it was, a small metal hatch door, no larger than 3 feet high. "What the hell?" I whispered. I reached for the handle. Locked. No lock on the outside, which means it can only be locked from the inside. My heart started beating louder, faster. Someone was, or had been, behind that door. And then, my phone vibrated. I almost jumped. It was Colton's name. I'd called him when I got home and forgotten about it. It was a voicemail. I played it. "Hey, sorry I missed your call. I'll swing by later. Make sure things are okay." Swing by later? No fucking way. I tried calling back immediately. No answer. Staring at that hatch, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind it, watching, listening. I sat on the floor, close to the wall, just breathing. Then, suddenly, I heard it, a click, the faint metallic scrape of a lock sliding back on the other side of the hatch. I leapt up and backed out of the room, shaking. In the silence that followed, I swear I could hear breathing, slow, steady human breathing. I went straight for my room and started packing. My hands moved on instinct. Grab everything. Don't look anywhere for too long. Don't listen, but I couldn't help it. I heard the footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming up the stairs. When I stepped back into the hall, suitcase in hand, the hallway felt longer than before. Shadows swallowed everything. Something was behind me. I didn't look. I ran down the stairs and reached the front door. I yanked it open and stumbled onto the porch. As soon as I took my second step toward the car, bang! The front door slammed shut behind me, like someone inside had punched it closed. I'd never moved faster in my life. When I got to the car, I whipped around. The porch light was still on, but the inside was completely dark. All I could hear was the wind rustling the trees. Not a single window moved. No face peered out. But I knew someone was in there. Maybe it was Colton. Maybe it was someone else living beneath that house. beneath every guest I spent that night at a Motel 6 off the highway. Lights on, shoes still on. I called Colton again, texted him even. Nothing. He vanished. The next morning, I logged into Airbnb to report the listing. It had already been removed. I still think about that hatch, the hidden room, the breathing that felt too close. I don't know who or what was down there, but I do know this. Sometimes when a door's meant to stay shut, you should never try to open it. But it was getting dark, and I didn't feel like driving tired through those unmarked roads. I made tea and sat by the fire instead, trying to push the fear down. I was almost halfway through my cup when I heard it again. The scream. This time it was closer and louder. It didn't seem to be coming from the woods anymore. It almost felt like it was all around the cabin. I stood up slowly, tea shaking in my hand. "Fuck this," I whispered. I put the cup down and moved to the back window. The forest outside was pitch black, total darkness. No movement, no figures. Then, thud. Someone stepped onto the porch. Boots on wood. Another thud. I froze. Whoever it was, they walked slowly, deliberately. Time slowed. Then came the knock. 3 slow bangs on the door. My throat closed up. I didn't even breathe at first. I crept over, barely able to lift my feet. When I finally reached the door, I peeked through the peephole. My stomach dropped. 2 men, the same ones from the woods, now wearing plastic masks, half lion, half bear type things, cheap Halloween style. They just stood there, silent. The taller one had a knife in his hand. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. No service, of course. I tried calling 911 anyway. Eventually I got 1 bar, just enough to barely get through. I whispered to the operator, explaining where I was. Then, just as suddenly, the taller man stabbed the door. Hard. The thud rattled my bones. I screamed. A few seconds later, I heard them walking away. No running. Just deliberate, ominous footsteps fading into the woods. When the cops pulled up 25 minutes later, they saw the knife mark. They listened to my story, but they didn't find anyone. No sign of other cars, no footprints, no signs of a struggle either. I left that night. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know what that sound was. There's no cabin 3 anymore on Ray's listing. He took it down. In fact, the whole listing is gone now. Every month or so, I search for disappearances in that area, just in case someone didn't get as lucky as I did. Even now, I still hear that sound in my dreams. And sometimes, though I tell myself it's just in my head, I hear it in the distance when I go camping. That's why I never stay anywhere that's off-grid anymore. Peace and quiet isn't always what it seems. I never thought a work promotion would lead me into a nightmare like this. That's how I look back on it now, anyway. But back then, it felt like a turning point. After 6 years in logistics at a mid-sized tech company, I finally got bumped up to regional coordination lead. It wasn't much more money, but it came with something I secretly always wanted: travel, and a lot of it. It meant overseeing shipments and distribution for different state branches of the company, sometimes popping in for random inspections or problem solving in person. The travel was supposed to be rotational and equitable, meaning I'd be on the road for 2 weeks out of every month. I was single, a bit of a homebody, but at that point, late 2022, I was craving something new. I'd just ended a 3-year relationship. The apartment was quiet. I figured might as well use this opportunity to reboot my mind. The first few months were honestly kind of fun. I'd fly to random states, stay in those typical Marriott-type hotels, or once in a while, a resort if the company's travel team felt like being fancy. But every now and then, I'd get an Airbnb. Why? No idea. They never told me the logic behind it, and I never asked. At first, I liked the mystery. Maybe they just flipped a coin. Maybe they picked random places to keep it relatable, considering how much time I'd be spending away from home. But by month 7, the novelty of it wore off. I was just tired. Tired of airports. Tired of lumpy hotel pillows. Tired of pretending I could sleep on planes. The 8th month was when everything changed. "You're headed to Michigan," said Kyle, our travel coordinator, sitting behind his computer screen in the office. "We booked you into an Airbnb near Rustford. You'll be there for 3 nights, all reimbursed." "Rustford?" I repeated. "That's like a super small town, right?" "Yeah, but it's close enough to our shipping hub. Their scheduling system's been glitching. They need someone on site to get it back on track." I nodded. "Got it. What's the Airbnb like?" Kyle stared at his screen for a second too long, then shrugged. Big, like mansion big." He turned the screen so I could see a few pictures. It was an old colonial-style house, 2 stories, huge porch, massive lawn. It looked like something out of a southern estate, even though this was Michigan. It was beautiful, like I could see myself vacationing there. But something about it in this context gave me a weird vibe. "Looks nice," I said. But in my head I thought, why am I staying in this thing alone? I flew out on a Tuesday night. Flight was a bit late but uneventful. Landed in Lansing around 12:30 a.m., grabbed the rental car, and hit the road. It was a 45-minute drive to Rustford, and the Airbnb was another 20 minutes beyond that. The countryside was dark, and I mean dark. No streetlights, no houses, just the occasional beam of light from a distant barn or farmhouse. Up until the edge of Rustford, I didn't see another car. I figured the place would be nearby. Usually Airbnbs for work trips were within 15 minutes from the work location, but this wasn't that. I kept driving, passing cornfields and silent patches of thick pine, until finally the GPS said, "Turn left in 300 feet." I slowed down, feeling my pulse jump a little as I saw a long driveway opening up in front of me, barely visible between tall oaks. Oh, hell. The house was massive, easily 5,000 square feet. There was a wraparound porch, huge front-facing windows, and a yellowish security light that cast most of the lawn in shadow. The house loomed in the dark like it was watching. And it was completely isolated. No signs of neighbors. No other houses down the road. Just this mansion in the middle of nowhere. Maybe the photos were outdated, and this was historic or abandoned, I thought at first. But then I spotted a Range Rover parked near the detached garage. Seemed modern enough. Checking the email confirmation, I triple-checked the address. It was the right place. Being too tired to overthink it, I grabbed my suitcase and headed in through the front door. The lockbox code worked. Inside, it smelled faintly like lemon cleaner, a sign someone had been here recently. But the inside, well, it wasn't as impressive. The decor was like someone got stuck in 1998 and never upgraded. Brown furniture, old floral couches, and somehow the house looked like it hadn't been lived in for months. Dusty corners, slightly crooked paintings. There was an eerie emptiness to it. No thanks, I muttered to myself. Even though it was too late to do anything, I needed sleep. I hauled my suitcase upstairs. Every step creaked. The upstairs landing was worse. I passed 3 closed doors before finding the room labeled Guest Suite. I opened it. The bed was huge, too huge, like a king plus. But everything felt slightly off. The air was cold, like the room had never been properly heated. A faint smell of pine or old books lingered. I laid in the bed, immediately wishing I was back at a shitty motel. At least those places were loud, and loud meant alive. The house made noises more than a normal house. The wind howled, sure, but the walls groaned. Something knocked behind the drywall every few minutes. I reached over and turned on a podcast on low volume. I always did that for sleep, anything to drown out the strangeness. Still, I kept hearing thumps. Screw it, I thought eventually. I needed water. I went downstairs like a zombie, glancing at the living room where a few throw pillows were scattered oddly, like someone had been sitting here but never bothered to clean up. I grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen tap, didn't turn any lights on aside from the dim over-sink bulb, and crawled back upstairs. This time, I forced myself to ignore every sound. Eventually, sleep came. The next day at the office was whatever. A lot of standing around, a lot of answering questions and pretending I wasn't half dead from travel. Rustford was just as I expected. Quiet, tight-knit, unremarkable. The only highlight was that the team invited me out for drinks afterward at a dive bar. I got back to the house at 11:15 p.m., half a burger left in a paper bag and my head buzzing from 2 IPAs. I plopped down on the old sofa and stared at one of those rustic wall clocks that looked like the ones from Target. It was ticking too loud. Jesus, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. Eventually, I decided to just go for it, look around the house properly. I'd only seen like 10% of it yesterday. Might as well satisfy my curiosity. I got up and started wandering. The dining room was big and windowed. The table was long too, with 8 chairs. One of them was pulled out, slightly offset. I didn't remember that from last night, but I figured I must have just forgotten. The study looked unused, bookshelves with more dust than books. The hallway closet had a light on inside. Weird, but maybe the cleaner forgot to turn it off. I walked upstairs, passing by a guest bathroom that weirdly had the mirror turned to face the wall. Okay, creepy decorating taste, but whatever. By the time I made it to the attic staircase, I paused. The hatch was pulled down, with the ladder sticking out. Yeah, no thanks, I muttered. I wasn't about to be that guy in the horror movie. I showered off the sticky bar smell and got into bed, this time almost numb to the distant creaking. Then the sound started again. At first, it was just the occasional faint groan from below, then actual rhythmic creaking, like footsteps. I sat up fast. No way. I held my breath, listening. There it was again. Step, step. A pause. Then one of the kitchen cabinets squeaked open. My pulse shot up. I swung my legs out of bed and walked quietly to the bedroom door. The noises were definitely coming from downstairs now, clear as day. I pressed my ear to the door. There, a slow dragging sound. A chair being moved. Fuck this, I muttered. My voice was just above a whisper, as if someone might hear me. I opened the door and tiptoed into the dark hallway. Every step on that old wood felt like it echoed. I walked slowly down the stairs, reached the bottom, and froze. The kitchen light was on. I know I turned it off, no doubt this time. And the chair. That chair was pulled out again. Same one. A slow creak behind me made me turn. At the far end of the room, almost hidden in the shadows, was something, someone, a figure, tallish, leaning just enough for me to see they were looking at me. We locked eyes, and I swear, I could feel a chill crawl up my spine like ice water. What the? I started to say, but before I could even fully make it out, the figure moved fast. They darted back into the darkness, disappearing through a doorway. I heard a slam, a door or something, and then silence. I ran, not toward them, but away. I bolted back up the stairs, grabbed my phone, and got the hell out of the house. I didn't think. I just ran to the car and peeled off the driveway. I parked down the road and called the cops. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial 911. When the cops arrived, I met them at the house. They went through it, top to bottom. Nothing. The host showed up at some point, looking annoyed instead of concerned. "I'm telling you, there's no one here," he said. "There's no door in that back area. It's just a pantry. Maybe you just fell asleep and imagined it." "I know what I saw," I snapped. "Someone was watching me." "There's no signs of forced entry," the cop replied, half sympathetic, half skeptical. "We'll file a report, but it might have just been a weird night. This house does creak. It's old, They left soon after the host offered no apology. In fact, I caught him snickering when he thought I wasn't looking. My company moved me to a Hampton Inn the next day. I finished my inspection. I flew home 2 days later, but even back in my apartment, every creak after that my skin crawl. Something was off about that house, and not in the old pipes kind of way. More like someone was living there, using it, watching whoever came through. And they knew the place better than I did, but there was no proof, no evidence, nothing I could point to except a single chair. Sometimes when I lie awake now, I see that moment, the eyes in the dark staring back at me, the feeling that I was just one moment away from something much worse happening. I've denied every Airbnb booking since. That spring in 2022, I was in a weird place in life. Work was draining me in all the wrong ways, and I was desperate for something, anything, that could pry me away from the monotony. I wasn't depressed exactly, but I was definitely treading water. No girlfriend, no kids, no debts even. Just a gnawing feeling that I was missing out on something. You know when your life feels fine, but it's just kind of empty. Anyway, I got this idea of renting a secluded cabin in the woods. Not a big trip, just a little break to clear my head. I'm not normally the cabin type, but I figured it was time to try something new. I wanted peace and quiet. No traffic, no emails, no expectations. Just birds, trees, and me. I searched for a bit and landed on this Airbnb listing for a forest retreat. Small off-grid cabin on a few acres in the middle of nowhere. The photos looked amazing. Clean cabin, wooden walls, a little porch with a rocking chair, and no neighbors in sight. The listing had like 4.8 stars, and the host, Ray, was marked as a super host. Good enough for me. The cabin was in Kentucky, just 2.5 hours away from where I lived in Cincinnati. Close enough to bail if things got weird. Far enough to feel like a real break. The drive down was uneventful, except that the last few miles were all dirt roads. No streetlights, barely any houses, just dense green forests on both sides that slowly swallowed the sky above me. GPS struggled a few times, but after following a narrow gravel path, I finally saw a sign, Spruce Hollow Retreats, cabins 1 to 5. It was carved from wood, rustic and weathered. As I drove further, I saw them. 5 identical cabins, spread far apart, each with its own little yard and a fire pit. Mine, cabin 3, was the furthest back, almost at the tree line, perfect. I got out of the car and stretched. The air smelled like pine and rain. I pulled out my bag and went inside. The cabin was beautiful inside. Cozy firewood stacked, coffee stuff on the counter, a map of the surrounding trails on the wall, and a little fireplace with a cleaned-out hearth. A welcome note from Ray sat on the table. "Enjoy your stay, Noah. You're the only guest this week. Trails are marked. Firewood is fresh. Mi casa es su casa." That last line was weird considering he wasn't Spanish, but whatever. The first night was perfect. I made pasta, lit a fire, played some music on my Bluetooth speaker. I even slept like a baby, which never happens when I travel. The next day I took things slow. Woke up late, made coffee, journaled for a bit. No phone service, no internet. It was actually refreshing. Around 4 in the afternoon, I decided to explore. I found a narrow path behind the cabin, barely visible unless you were looking for it. "I'll just follow this around for a bit," I muttered to myself, throwing on a hoodie. And honestly, I should have turned back when I hit the first fork in the trail, but I didn't. I kept walking. The sun was dipping and the trees were tall. It got dark quicker than I expected. Maybe I was 20 minutes into the hike when I saw them. 2 men standing still. Way off in the distance, 200 yards, maybe more. I stopped walking and squinted. They were facing down, completely motionless, staring at something. A hole, a dead animal, a rock. They didn't move, didn't speak, didn't seem to notice me. My heart rate accelerated, but I didn't know why. They weren't doing anything. weird. It was probably just other guests. I shook it off and kept walking, but something felt off. It was too quiet. No birds, no wind. The trees felt like they were leaning in. I walked a bit further, then stopped. The trail didn't curve like I thought. It just kept going deeper into the woods. No signs of looping back. I turned around. The two men were gone. Or so I thought. I had barely taken 5 steps in the direction of the cabin when I heard it. A sound that made my skin crawl. It was a scream, or maybe a call. Like an elk, but distorted, echoing unnaturally through the trees. Animal. Or human. I couldn't tell. The sound bounced everywhere and nowhere at once. I froze. And then I saw them. The same 2 men, now standing on the trail. Closer this time, 150 yards away. Facing me. Still. No movement, no sign they were breathing. "Hello?" I called out stupidly. No response. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. I took a step back. Then another. That's when they moved. Not toward me, but off the trail, slipping silently into the trees like they'd been swallowed whole. I waited. 10 seconds. 30. A minute. I strained to hear branches snapping, leaves crunching, anything that sounded human. But there was nothing. Just the growing darkness. I walked. Fast. Back to the cabin. Inside, I locked the door. I took a deep breath, then another. I'm just freaked out, I told myself. Probably some weird outdoorsman shit. Some hunter stuff. But the truth was, I was lying to myself. I should have left. But it was getting dark, and I didn't feel like driving tired through those unmarked roads. I made tea and sat by the fire instead, trying to push the fear down. I was almost halfway through my cup when I heard it again. The scream. This time, it was closer and louder. It didn't seem to be coming from the woods anymore. It almost felt like it was all around the cabin. I stood up slowly, tea shaking in my hand. "Fuck this," I whispered. I put the cup down and moved to the back window. The forest outside was pitch black, total darkness, no movement, no figures. Then, thud, someone stepped onto the porch, boots on wood, another thud. I froze. Whoever it was, they walked slowly, deliberately. Time slowed. Then came the knock. 3 slow bangs on the door. My throat closed up. I didn't even breathe at first. I crept over, barely able to lift my feet. When I finally reached the door, I peeked through the peephole. My stomach dropped. 2 men, the same ones from the woods, now wearing plastic masks, half lion, half bear type things, cheap Halloween style. They just stood there, silent. The taller one had a knife in his hand. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. No service, of course. I tried calling 911 anyway. Eventually I got 1 bar, just enough to barely get through. I whispered to the operator, explaining where I was. Then, just as suddenly, the taller man stabbed the door. Hard. The thud rattled my bones. I screamed. A few seconds later, I heard them walking away. No running. Just deliberate, ominous footsteps fading into the woods. When the cops pulled up 25 minutes later, they saw the knife mark. They listened to my story, but they didn't find anyone. No sign of other cars, no footprints, no signs of a struggle either. I left that night. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know what that sound was. There's no cabin 3 anymore on Ray's listing. He took it down. In fact, the whole listing is gone now. Every month or so, I search for disappearances in that area, just in case someone didn't get as lucky as I did. Even now, I still hear that sound in my dreams, and sometimes, though I tell myself it's just in my head, I hear it in the distance when I go camping. That's why I never stay anywhere that's off-grid anymore. Peace and quiet isn't always what it seems. I wasn't planning on making a big deal out of the trip. It was supposed to be a quick stopover, 3 days in Fort Baxter, New Mexico, for an interview at a mid-sized logistics firm called Dynaflex. It wasn't my dream job, but it was the best opportunity I'd gotten in months. The only problem was that Fort Baxter was a 5-hour drive from home, and the few motels nearby were either fully booked or way out of my budget. That's how I ended up booking a stay at a small Airbnb on the outskirts of town, a listing titled Quiet Desert Getaway. The photos showed a small modern cabin with a cozy porch and a panoramic view of the desert. The host, a guy named Eldon, had a 4.9-star rating with over 100 reviews. Sounded safe enough. It was late afternoon when I pulled into the driveway. The sun was already cooking the desert floor, bending the distant highway into a wavy mirage. The cabin was cute, white paint, clean siding, a simple porch swing, the kind of place you'd see in a travel blog. No immediate neighbors, just dry land, a rocky ridge in the distance, and an old dirt road fading behind me. I knocked, but no one answered, so I tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the place was spotless but sparse. One bedroom, a small living room with a love seat and a desk, a kitchenette, and a sliding door that opened to the backyard. Just endless desert, dirt, and sunlight. A cross breeze moved through the cabin when I went from the front door to the back, and I could taste the dusty air in my mouth. I dropped my duffel on the couch and set my laptop on the desk. I was determined to be prepared for the interview. Still, I needed the Wi-Fi password, and I hadn't heard from Eldon since I booked the place. I sent him a message through the Airbnb app. Me, hey, just checked in. Nice place. Can you send the Wi-Fi info? I didn't expect a fast reply. It was Monday, and most hosts have jobs or lives, right? So I made some coffee and started dusting off my resume just in case. About an hour later, while I was practicing answers like, "My greatest strength is problem solving," I heard a faint tapping noise. I stopped speaking mid-sentence. It was barely noticeable, like someone lightly tapping the side of a cup. I looked to my right. The window in the living room was dark, even though I hadn't turned on the lights yet, and I could see my reflection staring back at me tap. It wasn't like a knock, but I could tell it wasn't mechanical. Instinct said, "That's human." The first thing that hit me wasn't fear, it was curiosity. I went to the window and with hesitation drew back the curtain. Nothing, just red dirt and the sun long gone, replaced by deepening dusk. I checked the door. Locked. Even so, I went around and double-checked every latch. I told myself it must have been a bug, a stick from the yard blown by the wind. You know, rational stuff. Then I remembered I lived in a city. I didn't know shit about the desert. I tried to push it out of mind. The next morning, I woke up early, threw on a button-up and slacks, and headed down to Dynaflex. The office was tucked in a rundown strip mall, but the people were friendly, and the interview went pretty well. They told me I'd hear back by the end of the week. I was in a good mood driving back toward the Airbnb. Maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. When I pulled up, I noticed something I didn't see the night before. A pair of dusty footprints on the front porch, one set. Large, maybe size 12. The shape of the sole reminded me of work boots. "Probably the host," I whispered, even though my gut sank a little. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed. I spent the evening on the porch, phone in hand, catching up with work emails. But every now and then, I'd glance up at the open desert. The quiet was uneasy, like the silence you get after a fight, but before someone breaks down. As the sun dropped, I went inside, turned on some Netflix, and made microwave chili. That's when it happened. Same sound, same window. Tap. I stood up immediately. This wasn't random. No storm outside, no wind, no trees. Just flat land. This time, I didn't draw the curtain. I threw it open. Nothing. But my eyes told me something was different. Dirt patterns under the window looked disturbed. I bent down and touched the ground. It was fine dust, and someone had stepped there not long ago. I whispered, Okay, no, not cool. I checked the Airbnb inbox again. Eldon, hey, sorry for the delay. Been busy. Wi-Fi's inside the kitchen cabinet, above the sink. Right if you need anything. He still didn't address the fact that he hadn't been here, or maybe he had, earlier, and I missed him. Either way, I locked up early that night and made sure I had my phone right next to me. I was jolted awake at 2:15 a.m. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was coming from the bedroom window, the one right behind my head. I sat up in bed, breathing heavy, again hearing that same too familiar sound. It was taunting, deliberate, not an accident. I didn't look out this time. Instead, I whispered, "What the hell are you doing?" Silence. Then, from outside, in the dark, someone clicked their tongue slow, repetitive, like a parent calling a misbehaving dog. Ch, ch, ch. That sound, coming from an unknown face in total darkness, felt colder than any scream. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Who's out there?" I yelled, cracking open the window just an inch. My voice shook. I hated that. No answer. Then, a voice whispered from out in the desert, "Want to step outside?" Clear, calm, like they were smiling. I backed away from the window and grabbed my phone. I called 911. 911. What's the nature of your emergency? There's someone outside the Airbnb I'm renting. They've been knocking. It's been happening since last night. Are they attempting to break in? No, but do you see them right now? No, I just heard them. They're hiding. I heard them talking. Stay inside. Officers are en route. Lock all entries. Yes, ma'am. The sheriff's cruiser pulled in 10 minutes later. Of course, by the time we bright lit the place with flashlights, the desert was empty, except for fresh boot prints leading up behind the house and then down into a dry wash. The cop, a weary-faced man named Deputy Hark, sighed deeply. "You're not the first to call from this side of town. Far as I know, no one's been hurt. But some folks out here get too curious." "Curious," I repeated bitterly. "Lonely sometimes," he said, eyes drifting to the horizon. "There's a couple ranch hands, and an older fella who owns a junkyard a mile that way. Some kids too. Word is, their idea of fun is messing with people who rent these places." He took my info, gave me a card, and supposedly patrolled the area for an hour after I waited until he left, then sat awake the rest of the night, lights on. I didn't care if it was the host, a neighbor, or a bored psychopath. Someone was out there, and that was reason enough to leave. I checked out the next morning before sunup, threw my bag in the back seat, and drove straight to a motel near the interstate. The desk clerk didn't ask why I looked wired and jittery. I checked in, collapsed onto the single bed, and slept 4 solid hours. When I woke, I had 3 new messages on the Airbnb app. From Eldon, "Hey, saw your note to Airbnb? Something wrong?" Eldon, "Sorry you felt unsafe, but I was never on the property." Eldon, "Can you be specific on what you experienced so I can check in with the people next door?" Next door? I thought. There was no next door. Not for miles. I typed, "Me." Someone was on the property. Someone was watching me. They tapped on the window and spoke. They knew I was alone. He never responded. Airbnb only refunded part of the stay. For days, I couldn't shake the image of that quiet desert night. The invisible person clicking their tongue in the dark, like a little kid luring a stray dog. Sometimes, when I'm alone and tired, I still hear it. The soft tapping, the clicking, the voice asking, "Want to step outside?"